Portfolio Builder members, welcome to your February 6th update. Coronavirus growth rate day over day is 105% in Japan, 43% in South Korea, 45% in Taiwan, 20% in Malaysia, 16% Singapore, and 15% growth in China. If you believe them, Wuhan orders all citizens to provide daily temperature to the government. How on earth is that going to happen? Cruise ship is stranded out of Japan. They've already pulled 20 people off of it with the virus. The rest are trapped on there, presumably till there's no infections for a 14-day period, although I suspect there will be more and more. So we'll see how that turns into a chaotic event. Meanwhile, travel and supply chains continue to have more restrictions. They're not opening up. They are starting to get more protective, but don't worry, Japan is not going to delay the Olympics this July. So here's how we're playing our buy and hold portfolio currently. 1 share of SPY, 2 shares of TLT, 2 GDX, 1 Yang, which is the inverse large cap Chinese ETF, and $44 in cash. Now replicate that. We have tens of millions of dollars following this strategy. That's how I would do it without options. And again, in the right-hand corner of this video and in the description box, you can sign up for our email list. Join us it's been about 2 hours a day now that we're doing live webinars and going through charts, news, and providing uncensored content. Keep in mind, you know who is censoring content right now, so we have to be very careful what we say in this YouTube channel. On our more advanced program, where we'd rather have safety over total return, we have 100 shares of the SPY, 200 shares of the TLT, 200 shares of GDX, 200 shares of emerging markets ETF, currently in a $5 wide bull option collar on the SPY, which is up. We'll close that Friday and roll it into Monday. In our more advanced program, we're naked on the TLT and GDX. Now, we trade that on Thursdays. We had a 2-hour webinar today going through all the new footage that's emerged from China and now surrounding countries. And we're going to remain long those two positions until China resumes business and Japanese and U.S. numbers stop doubling week over week in terms of confirmed cases. So it takes 10% growth daily to double in a week's time. And again, we're using a bear option collar on emerging markets. That gives us a 10-to-1 risk to reward ratio. So if you want to get more info than what's provided in our free YouTube channel, click in the right-hand corner or the description box to take a free 7-day trial in our more advanced program. We use Zoom to do a live webinar daily right at noon Eastern, which is right when we issue options trades. So this is probably the single most important data to track on a daily basis to predict markets. Starting the year off, I wanted to be short the Treasury market and long emerging markets and U.S. equities. And that was because we went through a period of rate cuts last year, and I expected QE this year. That alongside all three major economies creating government deficits, which forces these central banks to buy up the debt and expand the money supply, which is very bullish for equities and puts pressure again on the yields for treasuries. But quickly in the first few weeks of January, we saw the emerging markets go the opposite direction of the SPY, and we saw the dollar strengthen and not weaken, which gave us a hint that something was wrong. Now, I would have never guessed in a million years that we'd have a pandemic breaking out. But sure enough, people in China knew this all the way back in December. Medical groups were talking about it, arrested. And one of the first doctors to speak out about this, who was arrested, did pass away today. Now, the Chinese censorship's trying to say he's not dead. There's a ton of people getting censored and banned off of WeChat. WeChat's like email for Chinese. They don't even use email. So anyways, let's just take a look at the numbers. This is the day-over-day growth rate of confirmed cases in countries outside of China. I do include China, but I just don't trust their data. And I'm much more interested in when we see a panic in Japan and the US, who, keep in mind, control probably 95% of the capital in the world. So if we start seeing this get out of control in your own country, US or Japan, and you're a big money manager, you're probably going to start thinking twice about holding equities. And so that's what I think will spark the next big sell-off in equities, is either one of these countries getting to an alarming rate of cases. Now, overnight, Japan spiked from 22 cases to 45. That is a huge jump of 104%. And keep in mind, it only takes 10%, which is what we saw right here the day prior, going from 20 to 22, but then jumping from 22 to 45. A gigantic jump. Here in Taiwan, we went from 11 to 16, a 45% jump. In Hong Kong and South Korea, a 14 and 43% jump. In the US, we've had slow, but again, this is about as far as you could possibly get from China. And it's still growing at 10% a day so far this week. Last week, when I first started tracking this, the US was at 5, and I have noticed it tends to jump suddenly. So we'll see where we're at in a week. But I want to be long the US Treasury market as long as this chaos is continuing to get worse and worse, and probably until after the Fed has come in and cut interest rates, which could take all of 2020 for them to finalize. So we may want to ride this TLT considerably higher, at least 10 to 20% higher. We'll take a look at some charts. So again, I'll be updating this daily. If you do join my email list in the bottom right-hand corner over here, or in the description box, you can join my email list. The first email I send you each morning is this updated, so you can see how bad it gets. And again, 10% growth rate is what we need to look for. Anything over is bad news. Anything under may show signs that we've got this under control. Now, also keep in mind what we're actually picking up today in terms of confirmed cases at a minimum is probably 10% of the real truth of how many people are infected. So Japan could already have 450 people infected and spreading the disease right now at a very bare bones minimum. By the time you make it to the doctor, get checked in, and get diagnosed, and it's released to the public, is a large delay. So this will be likely something we look at first thing each day in this video. Now also, if you do like this content, please help us out. The best thing you can do is leave a comment that says coronavirus and whatever you liked about this video. 1, 2, like the video, and then 3, subscribe and click the notification bell. That way you get this automatically in your feed on a daily basis. And if you really want to help us out, share this video on your news feed, and it'll help us push to the top rankings. Now this is a nice thread that is being constantly updated with a static URL over at Zero Hedge. So some highlights: Beijing completes second coronavirus hospital in Wuhan. Wuhan hospital denies the doctor who first warned about the virus is dead. Remember, they put him in jail, then he got sick, then they realized this was an outbreak. The Supreme Court released him, he went back to work, and now he's died after being diagnosed 6 days later. They're covering it up. People on WeChat are having a fit. We'll take a look at some tweets in a little bit. But people who are saying anything negative are getting their WeChat permanently terminated, which is really disconnects you from all of China. So it's a bad move if you're a Chinese citizen to do that. Taiwan halts visas for citizens of Macau and Hong Kong. Germany confirms 13th case. And Dubai reports the 3rd death outside of China. China completed its second hospital, which I think they're calling the Fire God Mountain or something. But there's clips emerging where the police are chasing people down, putting them in bags, and forcing them into these hospitals, which are more like prison cells with windows where they can give them food. So it's really just a bed, perhaps an air tank or an air mask in there. I'm assuming a toilet in each room, and then you get locked in there until you either die or beat the virus, which takes about 3 weeks. Now, interesting, China, with its centralized government and its specialty in building things, is very good at this. In fact, they've shown off to the world what they can do in 2 weeks' time. Here in the United States and other parts of the world, there's no way on God's green earth we could build anything of this magnitude in even a 10 times the time frame. And the cost would be enormous. So we'll see if this does continue to grow exponentially into other parts of the world. How well prepared can other countries deal with this situation? And with the censorship, with the ability to simply start nailing people into their apartments and not allowing them to go out, with this quite brutal police state in China, they can deal with an epidemic probably better than other places around the world. Time will tell. So what have central banks done to deal with this so far, as well as the U.S. media? They talk about it a little bit, but really not much. In fact, if you listen to Yahoo or CNBC, they think this is overblown and something of the magnitude of SARS. I heard one CNBC guy talking about how he's 100% in stocks and why on earth would you own bonds, but he's feeling a little nervous. Who knows if he's paid to say that. But the central banks are freaking out. They've injected over $250 billion in 72 hours. Now, right after the Trade One deal was created back in October, right before that is when all this money printing began. And basically, the central bank was thinking, the Fed, okay, the bond yields got way too low because of fears of the U.S.-China trade deal. And now that it's going to be resolved, we're going to have a hard time selling U.S. debt. So they rotated from rate cuts to stimulate business, create spending, lower the cost of money, incentivize taking out loans and making purchases, and to disincentivize saving. That's what happens when we lower rates. That's very bullish for the stock market, but it's very bearish for U.S. treasuries to be sold. And the government has a lot of debt to sell. In fact, the debt the Fed's not supposed to buy is all being unloaded next week. That's why I think we will see a pullback in the S&P 500 next week, coincidentally helping the U.S. government sell its debt to foreigners at a cheap interest rate. But in the short term, between China and the U.S., the reverse repo, which essentially lets big banks hand in treasuries for a short-term loan in cash, which they'll return later and get their treasuries back. Well, they've put over $250 billion into the markets. Now, October through December of 2019, we were adding $100 billion to the money supply in the U.S. per month. And you saw what that did to the stock market and to yields. TLT was tanking and the SPY was taking off. And so to deal with the issue of business slowdown, GDP crashing from China being shut down, they have gone absolutely ballistic. So $100 billion a month was more than we've ever seen in history, greater than that of QE1, QE2 in terms of growth per month. But to stimulate over $250 billion in a 3-day period is nuts. And yet last night when I was going through charts, every single thing is up. Crypto's flying higher. Oil's up. Who's going to buy the oil? Nobody. Airliners were up. Stocks are up. Okay, so they're trying to not give the financial market a panic attack and trying to support these assets while this continues to get worse and worse, and they continue to keep it hush-hush. So we can see just about everything's up from treasuries, which is smart money, obviously, picking that up, realizing what's coming next. The dollar's getting a bid. The Chinese yuan should be losing value. They are cutting rates and printing an obscene amount of money, but no, it's strengthening because they are strengthening it. Bitcoin's up, Ethereum's up. Now, again, for our members, we recommend 8% in GDX, 1% in Bitcoin, and 1% in Ethereum if you do want to dabble in crypto. So 2% of the total portfolio is in those assets, and we take profits if it goes over those allocation sizes. Add if it goes below. It's been going up for most of the year, which is when we first gave this, was in 2018 December is when we first went long gold and Bitcoin. So we're up tremendously on that. But it's just pure madness. There's so much money being flung into the markets. They're trying to hide what's really happening, protect corporations, and we'll see how long they can pull that off. But how many hundred cases in the U.S. before money managers here start selling? If it grows at 100% a week, well, it only takes a few weeks before we get to pretty alarming numbers. I'm just going to look at a few headlines here, but nightmare at sea, more than 7,000 quarantined on 2 cruise ships, one off the coast of Japan, and I believe the other's near Hong Kong. And what are they going to do with these people? They are probably all going to get infected. Chinese city provokes public backlash by stealing shipments of face masks. So now we're seeing the fighting over the face masks. Foxconn, who builds your iPhone, is making their own masks so they can get back to work before they break supply chains. Apple warns coronavirus could jeopardize orders for 45 million AirPods. Tesla shares plunge again as company says it will shutter China stores due to coronavirus. This could also just be all the people who are short selling it. The big investors have a lot of money. They just simply push the share price up until these hedge funds were so underwater on their short positions they're forced to cover, which I think is what caused that huge spike. And I was talking about shorting it. It was just too busy in our day. Could be too late. Maybe not. But after all those people are forced to buy the stock, drive up the price, they're all racing to do that. Then they're all racing to sell the shares because this is the company they hate so much. So what a chaotic event. Also, after not having the repo market oversubscribed, we've seen that twice this week. That tells you the banks are out of cash. They either sell treasuries or other assets to free up money, or they give these mortgage-backed securities and treasuries to the Fed for cash for a short-term loan. And so this shows that the banks have no liquidity and the markets are at risk of a sell-off because, again, no funding from JP Morgan to your broker-dealer. Now your hedge fund can't use leverage to buy the dip. So Goldman has an article out expecting global GDP to drop 2%, and I think that was from 3.6 or 3.2 they estimated at the IMF. So that'll bring us down to a very slow crawl, but then they're expecting that GDP skyrockets in quarter 2 and that this whole coronavirus is taken care of by then. Regardless, until it is taken care of, it makes a whole lot of sense to be long the TLT, expecting rate cuts to help boost business confidence and support stocks. And if you are trading stocks, to make sure you have downside protection. With our strategy, the half TLT, half SPY strategy, makes it very hard to lose money. And we can also see if it looks like there's an obvious sell-off, we'll get out of the way of the stock market and allow the TLT to run. But we want to be long both at the same time right now until that happens. Because keep in mind, the Fed is pumping so much money into U.S. markets right now that they are flying up at a pace I've only seen a few times in history. This week alone, the SPY jumped about $9 in a 48-hour window. Over at Twitter now, the 2 trending topics censored by Weibo tonight, which I believe something like their Facebook or their Twitter. Wuhan government owes Dr. Li Wenliang an apology, hashtag, and hashtag we want freedom of speech. Both had tens of thousands of views before disappearing into this dark night. Censorship on another level. Only verified accounts can post with the Li Wenliang related hashtag and have their posts shown under the trending hashtag on Weibo. So people have been very upset about this doctor who was jailed, then released, and then got infected. His whole family is infected, and he died. He was diagnosed on the 1st, died on the 6th. Then the hospital tried to say he was not dead, and then just a few hours later they just said, okay, he actually is dead. So this has been really, really creating a lot of anger. Sad news, Li Wenliang, the Wuhan doctor who first sounded alarm about the coronavirus, has died. Instead of listening to him, Chinese Communist authorities arrested him and forced him to write a self-criticism, a Maoist-era method of punishing dissenting voices. China's government is still trying to hide Dr. Li Weiling's death. He died cardiac arrest more than 3 hours ago. Yet they refused to report formally for fear of public rage. Another doctor actually died of a heart attack who was only 35 as well. Now in this little clip, this I believe is the airplane we flew in to rescue a couple hundred Americans. No idea how they're doing, but look at these crazy suits that
this airplane. Show of hands, has anybody not finished it yet? The only reason I say this is it's going to get really weird when everybody gets off the plane and you cannot. Because you have to have that in order to leave.
Another clip. Now, if you see any videos with people carrying guns in China, the so-called doctors, here's a clip claiming that an infected woman fleeing a quarantine was shot. Little clip from the Chinese government.
拒不报备，从武汉回来隐瞒不报，涉嫌危害公共安全罪，最高可判死刑。明知自己疑似感染新型冠状病毒，拒不报备，不执行自我隔离等控制措施，危害公共安全，涉嫌以危险方法危害公共安全罪，可处10年以上有期徒刑、无期徒刑，甚至死刑。吉林、山东、四川等地的公安已以该罪名对隐瞒不报人员进行了刑事立案。因此，从武汉回来的人员一定要如实报备，让我们团结一致，共战疫情。
Another clip that's new that we haven't shown yet.
慢点，摩托机。哎，导演，看不见啊？哎，干什么去妹妹？多喊了。好喝。
Now, this is a Discord chat I set up on Reddit trying to communicate with a lady from Macau who's trying to set up a YouTube channel. And quickly, this turned into thousands of members. It's a video game chat app, and a lot of good info coming into here. I did send the ownership to other experts, Psylocke, and then he's created a lot of different moderators. But this is a good source of information as well. And it was just crazy to see how fast this got spread around on Reddit, which is owned partially by Tencent. So that's why we want to get off of that. But the Chinese have intelligently purchased a large share in just about every piece of technology that has to do with communication, from Snapchat to TikTok to Reddit to, anything that controls the dialogue, they want to have their hands on. The only new video I found on there today is this one, and apparently, from what I know, is that when you run out of oxygen because of the coronavirus, essentially inflaming your air sacs in your lungs, you can't get oxygen to the blood, so your organs start to fail and your body starts shaking. And I actually watched my mother pass away with that from lymphoma cancer. And it was not fun. So I'm not sure what we're seeing in here, but it does look like This is a very severe group of people. So that's what's going on in China and the surrounding territories. But, if you watch mainstream U.S. media, you'd have no idea. One. Two, if you look at the stock market, what in God's green earth is happening here? The Chinese indexes, all three of them are up. So a lot of market manipulation. They've outlawed selling for major shareholders. They've told all the broker-dealers in China that they have to buy. And they've injected $180 billion so far. Probably a lot more coming in. And so, again, they're trying to prevent a panic. My expectation is that there's going to be economic repercussions, and that's why I want to be short the emerging markets now. China can support their companies, which, again, not really freely traded. They're going to have a harder time protecting the companies in South Korea, which is one of the large positions, the Taiwanese semiconductor company, Samsung in Japan. So there's big companies in the EEM ETF that are not as easily manipulated by China. The biggest two are Tencent and Alibaba, which are national prizes for China. And you have people like Stanley Druckenmiller, Ray Dalio, with huge, massive positions in specifically those two companies. So wait until we get enough fear to start putting pressure on those two specific companies.